Hello everyone, welcome to another video on Spring AI. So in today's class, what we will do is we will try to integrate PGVectorStore, right? So PGVectorStore means PostgreSQL. So it's an extension that we can have in our PostgreSDB on the vector end extension through which we can actually embed or we can store embeddings in our PostgreSDB, right? So we'll go move forward. So in our previous class, what we have done is uh, we have done in-memory vector store, right? So we didn't persist it in our DB. So we just simply, when our application started, so we stored the embeddings in our in-memory, right? In the application itself. And then, so the problem there was the moment we stopped that application, all our embeddings would have got deleted, right? Because it's not persistent. So now to resolve that, what we want to do is we want to store it in a persistent layer, right? So in this case, we have this PGVectorStore. So let's go. So for this, the thing that we have to do is, first we need to install PG admin tool, right? Or the Postgres, we have to install it. So I'll give you in the link in the description, in the YouTube description. So after you install PG admin tool and the Postgres, so what we will do is we come to this console, right? And we will create, so first is we have to create this extension vector because by default Postgres do not have this vector extension. We will create this and then we'll create two tables. One is the movies table. So this is basically we are storing our movie data. So in this example, what we are doing is we'll have movie some data. What like here you can see a name, genre, language, actors, plot. So these are the data fields. And in another table, which is the movies vector store, we will store the embeddings of it. Like let's suppose the plot is there, right? A plot home movie gives a basic understanding of what the movie is. So we are storing that information as an embedding, right? So when we query, say suppose based on certain aspect of the plot, so it will give me that movie, right? So that's why we are creating two tables here. And then the other is the index we are creating, the embedding vector cosine obst. So the details of this we will cover in another video, like what exactly this HNSW means and all those. So here we are just going into the application part of it. So once we have created this table, these two tables, so what we'll go next, we go into our application. Here, the first thing is again, we have to go to our file, add our dependencies, right? So the one dependency is the Spring AI PgVectorStore because we are using that vector store. So we have to have this, and we are using SpringBoot starter data JPA because we'll be using JPA as our layer for inserting into our DD, right? So for this, we will have this, and we'll have PgVector to connect to our PgVectorStore, right? So these are the three dependencies that we'll go. Next is we will go to our properties file, and so we'll configure this like as usual, like we do generally now any other Spring Boot application where we configure a database. So to give our database URL, username, password, and DDL auto update or go DDL auto as update, right? Another on top of it, what we have to do is we have to also provide the index type, right? So here the index type is HNSW, and then the distance tag is cosine distance, and the dimension is 384. This is because we are using Ollama model. So this all mini LN. So this uses the same dimension as 384, right? So that's why we configured it as 384. Next, if we move to the configuration part. So there, if you see here, like in our previous class, we have seen how we've configured Ollama, right? So Ollama embedding model, and then how we have done also for Pinecone, how we have done this. You can find these videos in the playlist here, right? So for PGVectorStore, what we're doing is we are using our, first of all, yeah, this initialization we're doing based on our properties file, and then we are using our Ollama embedding model. Here we can change it to OpenAI as well, the main embedding model that we want to use, and then we are initializing all this data. So here, if you see the initialize schema, I kept it as false because we have already done that in our database layer. Then the schema name is publics, and then the vector table name, the movies vector store, right? What we have already configured. So these basically to initiate create our Spring bin, right? The vector store bin for PGVectorStore. So next, if I go, so next is this is the basic like how we create for any other Spring Boot application a movie repository, extending JPA repository, right? And then what we this is one of the critical part where we are initializing some data. So by default, what we do is when we start the application, right, we will create some dummy data so that later on, like when we are calling our HTTP endpoints, we will simply create the embeddings and do the relevant searches, right? So here we're just creating some data and we are pushing it into our movies table, right? So these are the just given some data and pushed it some field film names, actor, and the plot of it. So if you see the plot of it, right? So next, if I go to the our main part, which is the so okay, the entry null. Let me explain this as well. So this like any other Spring Boot application, we have created the table name as movies, annotated as entity, and we have configured all the necessary fields, right? Now the crucial part is the movie controller part, where what we're doing is we're creating an endpoint, movie endpoint, right? And here the qualifier is PGVectorStore. This is what the qualifier we have. Basically, the PGVectorStore is the vector store we will be using for this. Now, next is the create embeddings. So this is where we will create our embeddings for the movies, like whatever we have stored, right? The information when we start the application, we have stored that all the movies. Now we'll create on calling on this API, we will create the embeddings. So here, if you see, we have the movies blank. First of all, we are fetching all the movies from the movie repository, right? And then we are configuring for each of the movie, right? For each of the movie, we are creating the metadata information, basically picking the genre, language, and actors. And then we are creating this document. So here, if you see, the document is in Spring Framework AI document. So this is what we will be adding to our vector store. So we are initializing our document with the movie ID, right? And then the plot, because plot is the one where we will create the embeddings for, and the metadata inputs. And we are adding into our document list, and this document list will pass on to our vector store. Okay. So once we are done with adding our documents to the vector store, automatically we will see in our DB, we will have our vector. If I query this, we will have our vector embeddings, right? Like if you see here, so if I go, so these are my embeddings which are already created, right? So next we will create a search endpoint. So this is like in our previous class, as we talked about, it's same. We will create a similarity search, a search request with top 3 documents, right? And then the query that we are passing from the Postman or the UI, right? And then what we're doing is after fetching the documents which are relevant, right? The relevant based on the query, the relevant top 3 documents after fetching it. Now in this step, we are mapping it back to our movies, right? So our movie entity is our primary data source. So from there, we are mapping our documents with this movie entity, right? And then we're just creating our list of keys. So this is what we could do. So here what we learned is first of all, how to store those embeddings in our PGVectorStore, right? Or in our PostgreSQL. So now here I've already run the application. Let me go ahead and give you a small just running. So if I do a search, so if I see movies of comedy, so we'll get so we got this comedy genre. We have got some movies, right? This is not exactly matched, but I think it's close one is this. So maybe it's Frankenstein. So yeah, it's kind of fictional character. So it picked it up for comedy. If I try it for something like say movies of fight, so it will give me action movies. Fight is there. Fight is there. Yeah. So it is kind of working quite good, right? So here, now even if I stop my server and even if I restart, so I can still access this embeddings, right? Because we have already created it and persisted it, converting. So this is what is in our this lesson. So in our next class, we will probably work into here. As you have seen, we have initialized this data manually, like we created it, dummy data. Next, we can probably load it from our any PDF file or any other document where we have this data. So here we have some structured data. Maybe we can have a document which is unstructured, right? A PDF file, a book, or so anything, right? So from there, how can we extract and then create embeddings out of it? We can look into that. Then we can have this MCP server connected starting in our local server. This we can do. Okay, stay tuned. Yep. Request you guys to like and subscribe so that whenever I give some video on this topic, you get it. Right?